All right, we're back in studio with Demian Spindler, and he is a musician, producer, photographer, videographer, and a male model. And I'm getting a little hot under the collar here, Demian. I have to tell you. So thank you for coming into the studio.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Today is Whiskey Day, by the way.
That is true. So what do you think about this guy we got in front of us here? So this
really tasty so far.
You're enjoying it. So this is Nika Coffee Grain Whiskey, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Again, we just had a conversation about me being terrible at pronunciation, but it's actually, I guess, the process that they use to distill it. It's called a coffee still, Coffey still. Apparently some weird still out of Scotland, it looks like. So it's not actually like coffee, like you would drink coffee, but some sort of weird still that gives it.
We should put some pictures up on our Instagram.
I will. It's really delicious, actually. I've been really into Japanese whiskeys of all things. They make fantastic whiskey. And we were talking a little bit, right, about you're into some scotch.
I like scotch. I like whiskey. Yep.
So I might have to take your opinions and write down. So if you have any.
I don't have a lot of experience with Japanese whiskeys, but I like this one so far.
All right. Yeah, it's good. It's
Very
good stuff.
Good.
So I guess the reason why we had you in the studio today is really I wanted to talk to you about everything you're doing. One in town, because you got some musicians you're working with your record label. What's the name of it again?
Average Record Label.
Average Record Label. You can give. What's the you have? I'm guessing a website. Right?
Yep. You can just go to averagerecordlabel.com to find more about my artists and what we're doing.
Cool. So what I guess we could start at the beginning, because obviously someone that started a record label, you have a lot of interest in music for some reason, right? And I'm guessing that's because part of your bio here says that you are a musician yourself.
Exactly.
Right?
So my whole life, both of my parents are musicians. They both teach piano at Eastman in the preparatory department. And so I never really I was always just around music. I played piano from probably when I was 4 or 5, and then I started trumpet in elementary school, and so classically trained from the beginning.
Wow.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so both your parents teach
Yep,
music?
they both teach piano for the Eastman Community Music School.
And because I'm not here or from here, the Eastman School is that college level and up. That's
exactly
essentially what it is.
Yep, it's part of the University of Rochester.
Because this is going to be listened to probably internationally too on the podcast. So people may not know what the Eastman School of Music, or they may know it very well because obviously it's a big music school, right?
It's very well
in the
known.
world of music.
Yeah.
So you said your parents. What was your?
So my parents are both piano teachers in the community music school.
Oh, that's
so
good.
They're teaching at the high school level and earlier, as well as adults, but not so much in the collegiate department.
Okay, so they're I'm guessing they have some classical training behind them and they know theory and stuff
so
like that.
Both of them went through Eastman, and then they've both been teaching there for longer than my lifetime, 30, 40 years, something like that.
So let me ask you, because you said you've been playing since you were 4. Were you like playing whole like the Moonlight Sonata when you were 4 and they were hitting you with the stick, or what was it?
I think we had 3 or 4 pianos in our house growing up, and so they were just naturally part of your day-to-day. Every morning before school we would have to practice piano. I would have supervised practice every day, so there was no escaping it.
Nice. So was it something too, like it just as a fun thing or something to do when you're bored? You would go sit at the piano?
I think as far back as my working memory goes, it was always kind of work, but
right,
the piano at least.
I've heard that too with like people that have typical lessons, or like your parents are obviously both teachers, so they probably approach teaching you how to play from that official teacher point of view, that it tends to become like a chore. So did you move away from piano, because you said you played trumpet?
Yeah, I never really have moved away from piano. It's always been there. It's I was more serious with trumpet. That was my main instrument, starting probably 3rd, 4th grade, something like that. And then throughout high school, I was primarily a trumpeter. So the piano sort of, got placed on the back burner. But still there, and I still play.
Do you have a piano at home now?
Yes, at my parents' house. I don't currently practice too much, but
Sarah used to play the trumpet, or still does. Do you think you could still play right now, Sarah?
I don't think my embouchure is up to it.
Oh my!
It requires lots of maintenance.
No, I know. I think it's been a long time.
For the layman out there, what is that?
Embouchure.
Embouchure, and what is that, Sarah?
I'm not going to be quizzed right now.
Basically,
Demian, tell me what it is.
The passageway of air through the lips.
Yes.
Okay, so the way that's something I've always had problems with. I've tried to pick up woodwind instruments. Like I could play the flute, sort of. I can get a bunch of notes out. I was never trained in any theory or anything like that, but I could play that. Trumpet, I've tried to just pick it up and try and play it, and I just can't.
There's a very specific way that you have to push the air out, and I was so mad when I went in third grade, and they said, you can't make a sound on the trumpet, so you're going to play the clarinet. That's like the default instrument.
Right. And
one of my friends had the trumpet, so I would go over to her house every day and I said, I'm going to make a sound on this thing if it kills me. And you really have to, even flutes are hard to do. You have to figure out how to.
Yeah, so the flute it took me a little while to get to it, but I eventually got it. I never stuck with it, though. I borrowed my cousin's flute for a while and then just never gave it back to her. And now I think it got lost in the several dozen moves that we've made over the years. But so when you were young, because I remember playing, I was in the same situation. My dad played music. My grandmother played the mandolin. My dad was more in like rock bands and no formal training or anything like that. So there was always just guitars, kind of like you see here, just laying around for people to pick up. And when I was bored, I would just pick it up and start playing it. When did you start like writing your own stuff? Because I know the theory kind of comes first, learning how to play chords or whatever.
So I was very much strictly classical, reading the notes off the page through high school, even into college in the beginning. And I didn't really start writing my own stuff, which is mainly electronic stuff now, until probably maybe halfway through freshman, maybe sophomore year of college. And so at that point I started using synthesizers and making more interesting stuff, more interesting meaning just breaking away from classical music.
Right.
Which
do you ever incorporate like some classical music into the...
So I think in terms of breaking genre, it's all fluid. So I think that all of my classical training comes through in the stuff that I do with synthesizers. I think.
Yeah, and I think that's something too with like synthesizers. I mean, it's almost all played pretty much unless you're using pads on like a keyboard of some sort. So it's technically piano. You're just getting different sounds.
Right. I mean, I'll use sequencers, or I'll use MIDI entry and stuff like that. So I'm not really playing, keys like I would on piano. It's more writing it into Logic in my case, and
so you're going in and writing notation in the program, and then,
exactly.
See, that's something I wish I could do too. I wish I could like see notes on a page. I can't read music. I should really. I've tried to learn on a couple of occasions but I just get bored so easily. I get bored really easily.
With learning in general?
With learning. I'm good at very, very specific things and sitting down and like coding. I've tried to do coding. Yep. I just don't have the personality, I think, to sit still that long and do it. So we're on air here with Demian Spindler on WXIR 100.9 Extreme Independent Radio, and we're talking to him a little bit about music. And so you started writing songs, you said, around college age. Is this, I know you have an EP out, or is it a full length?
It's actually a full length album. I just released it just 6 months ago or so, and it's called Material, and it's a collection of sort of genreless electronic music, sort of general electronics, sort of whatever came to mind. Some of it sort of falls into a house category, some of it falls into closer to almost classical-like music. I don't really know if there's a good genre to just place the whole album into.
Right. So I've asked this of other musicians that we've had on the show too, where songwriting or how people approach songwriting is interesting to me. when I go to write a song, and Sarah knows this, sometimes I'll just be sitting in my underwear drinking coffee in the morning before we're about to go out somewhere. And I don't go out in my underwear, only occasionally, on special occasions. But I'll just be fooling around with the guitar, playing around with different chords or notes or whatever. I'll hear something and then I'll start playing it, and then I'll force them to wait for me while I record it real quick onto something so I have the idea, and then I'll be thinking about it the entire day, eventually write notes in my phone or whatever. When you go about writing a song, do you have like a specific way?
No, I'd say it's very similar to what you were just talking about.
Okay.
Sort of playing around, seeing what sounds good. If I have a synthesizer in front of me, I'll be playing with stuff until I get a sound I like, and maybe putting notes into a sequencer and just see sort of what sounds good. I don't have any like specific workflow where I start with the beat or I start with the bass or anything like that. It's just whatever happens to sound good, and then I'll just keep adding on to that. And
I found too, like some people start with a theme. They have in their minds, this is the theme I want to write to, and I find like theory really helps with delivering on that, like getting it from what you want in your head or whatever to it. But I kind of just stumble through it until I get to it. You know what I mean? So it's interesting to me the way that happens, especially with bands. And when we had Moving Mountains in here, I was talking to them about how they interact with it. It's usually one individual, I guess, in their band that kind of comes up with the basic idea, and then they start adding to it and it evolves.
Yeah.
Which is why I think we've talked about this at some point, me and you too, maybe at one of the musician professional meetings that we've had, about starting like songwriter sessions. Because that difference in how you write too, I think can only produce like better songs. Where like you may write the way I write, someone that comes in, all right, I have all the lyrics, I have an idea for a song, I may not have a melody or whatever. Those two people coming together and putting that style together might produce some stuff that them on their own would never.
Right. I found when I started writing electronic music, and at the time I was listening to a lot of progressive house and most stuff in that genre, and when I started producing, I was sort of restricting myself to progressive house. I would have to be at 128 beats per minute. We'd have a beat and sort of a bass line and go off of there. And what I found on this newest album that I did is that by not sticking to a genre, by not restricting myself to a certain tempo or style of beat, I've been sort of able to come up with a much more diverse, creative sort of complete album that I think works together really well. But every track had such a different approach, and so. And
you said the name was Material?
It's called Material. Yep.
Where did you come up with the name? Was it just something that
it's how this album I was working on for over a year, and it started out. Actually, the second track on the album is called Productoak, and that's a Basque term. And
Basque, so like Spain.
The northern part of Spain, and sort of how it started. I was living in Spain. Actually, I was in Spain for a few months, and I was in Bilbao in the north, and I saw a sign that said Productoak, and I just thought that sounded cool. So so I actually to start writing that track, I actually started with the name, with the track name. And to me it had sort of an industrial sort of factory vibe to it, and so I actually started with the beat on that one, and so that was the start to the whole album. And I didn't really know what it was going to be, but at the time I thought maybe sort of an industrial house sounding album or something, and I would build off of that. And so I wrote the beat first, just the drums, and had that, and probably a couple of months later came up with the bass line. I sort of let it sit while I was working on other projects, and built off of it from there.
So the name, say it again?
It's called Productoak.
So do you know what that means?
So I originally thought that it had a industrial connotation, but I think I haven't really been able to find out. I think it means produce, like vegetables.
Yeah, there is a lot of
So-
agriculture and stuff.
Yeah, so I guess I unknowingly wrote a track about vegetables, but
and that's so
So-
you were did you mostly stay in like northern Spain, or were
I
you kind
was
of all over
all
the country?
over. I was there with a friend of mine. We started in Granada in the south. We were there for a month, and then we toured around.
That's
and,
cool.
and sort of my first plan was that I was going to write a track for every city that we went to, and I didn't actually do that. But I did come out with the one track from Bilbao, and so that's the one that actually made it to the album.
Huh. So did you drink any cider when you were over there? Any Spanish
I
cider?
didn't actually.
Nothing.
No, I didn't.
Not even were you in Basque? You said.
I was in Bilbao and San Sebastian, and nope, I didn't drink any cider.
I'm a little ashamed of you,
I
Damian.
know.
So just for those tuning in right now, we're talking to Demian Spindler, owner of Average record label here in Rochester. So one of the things I wanted to ask, so now you have your own album, obviously, but you decided to kind of move into helping out other artists,
Exactly.
and starting this label.
Yeah.
So when did that get started?
Yeah,
Where did that
so-
idea come from?
We launched the label in December of 2017, so just 6 or 7 months ago. And the idea originally was that I would work with, basically I would produce for artists that didn't have a producer, or, needed to have sort of artist development. They might be a talented songwriter, but not have the know-how of how to like produce a track or do electronic tracks or pop tracks, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And because I kind of have experience in that, I thought, well, it would be good for me to work with artists, not only to help them along, but also give me something to work on other than just weird electronic music that has very little market.
So I guess I have another question for you after this, but you have a few artists, right?
Yeah. So my first artist is Sophie Danowski. She actually lives in North Carolina, and she's actually my girlfriend's sister.
Oh, nice.
And so that was an easy connection there. And I thought I heard some of her songs that she had written with guitar, and I thought, wow, this is great.
What's the name again? It's
Sophie Danowski.
Sophie Danowski.
And you can find her.
What kind of music does she?
Sort of independent indie pop kind of stuff.
Okay.
So singer-songwriter-y, and I thought, great stuff. It'd be great to put sort of some pop beats to that.
And she's got, I'm guessing, stuff on like iTunes. And...
Yep. So she's on iTunes and Spotify.
Okay, cool. And then I know you only have a few at the moment, right? Because you're just starting.
We're
this
just
whole
starting out.
label thing out. But...
Yep. So I've released my own album. I've released an album, or an EP rather, for Greg Best.
Yeah, we had him on the show a couple of weeks
Yep, he was
ago.
here.
3 or 4 weeks now.
Yep. So we released his first EP, which came out really, really well, I think.
Yeah,
really
it's a good. That. I like his album.
Yeah. I think it's
great. So the jump from songwriter to record label, obviously you're dealing with the artist in a different way.
Right.
How has that relationship been? Like, because I find that when I go to do something new, just like you said, hey, I think I can approach music maybe from a different angle and help with some strengths I have. Meanwhile, you don't have any experience, right? In owning a record label before. You don't come from a record executive background, right?
Exactly.
So sometimes just jumping straight into things, I find is the best way to learn how to do it.
That's true. I guess my initial worry is that if I were owning a record label, it would make it would take away from the creative process and turn me into a business person, and I don't think that that's the case. I don't think that's going to happen. At least not the way that I'm running this.
At least so far, right?
Exactly.
You don't have the big fat cats coming up to you.
No. And I think that I want to stay totally independent. And I mean, the whole point of really starting the label in the beginning is to sort of put together a group of musicians who I like the music of, and they can build off of each other. We can have them working with each other. They all work with me to some extent, and it sort of puts together a nice little community of artists who I think all have really good music,
Yeah, and probably similar kind of goals with what they want to
Exactly.
they want to get out of it.
Need some development, need to just be released on iTunes and Spotify. And it's easy these days. Any independent artist can just put their stuff up on iTunes and Spotify, but they don't have like the sort of community behind them.
Yeah.
They don't have like promotion. And so if one of my artists, if somebody likes one of my artists and they see that they're through the label, they can find the other artists. And so it's everybody, it's sort of a win-win for everybody.
That cross promotion
Exactly.
that you get through that.
Yeah.
So that I kind of find is in need in the music community, especially now. It's so easy to just put your stuff out on, a Spotify or iTunes or a Pandora or whatever, and you get your music out there. But the actual business side of it is so, it's different now than what it was. So if you're taking advice of these old guys that have been in the music business for a long, long time, it's a whole different ballgame now.
Yeah, sales are not what they used to be.
Yeah.
Now we've moved to streaming and
and I think that the CD sales and that sort of thing. I mean, while you can do some of that, it's not really the main business part. It's almost like people or the musicians nowadays, the streaming. You kind of give away your music to get people to come out to shows or to get your music known so that it'll get placed in like commercials or radio or not radio but movies or whatever.
Right.
And that's how musicians are getting paid now. So it's a whole different ball game. I said that. Did I say ball game before? Whole different world.
It's just it's different. It's just totally different.
It is. And so I think having someone like you who doesn't necessarily, and I say this is a good thing, doesn't have the bad habits of being in the music business for so long and being stuck in those ways of doing things that are starting to not work, I think is a good thing. And I think you should continue to do it. And learn the business aspect of it too, in terms of how to market in a way that's relevant now.
Right. And that's one of the things that as we go and move forward, I'll learn and I'll have to change, certain things within the business and sort of my approach to the label and that sort of thing. And so I'm totally open to changing the way that, going with the flow kind of thing, evolving the business as needed.
Yeah. Well, you got some great music on there. So I'm going to ask you a little off music topic here. Sure. So I see you also are a photographer, videographer. So kind of, I feel like at this point I'm reading my own bio up top here, except for the male model part. I don't do as much modeling these days in my old age.
Me neither, to be honest.
Demian. So for those tuning in, we're talking to Demian Spindler on 100.9 WXIR Extreme Independent Radio. Videographer and photographer. So how'd you get into that? How'd you make the jump from music to...
Right. So it started as a sort of hobby when I was in 5th grade. And at the time I was learning how to shoot on black and white film. And my school had a darkroom, and so I learned at that point how to develop my own film and enlarge it, and that was sort of the start of it. And then I continued that in high school. My high school also had a darkroom, and so I learned a lot of stuff there through the photography class. And sort of recently, several years ago, a friend of mine and me sort of put together a little film production company where we would make sort